Tonight's notes are about the Articles of Confederation, which was our first constitution. So when we first break away from England, we get together and decide that what our government's going to look like, and the first stab at it is the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation is the name that was given to our first constitution, right? Which is our plan of government. And it was written in 1777, which was during the American Revolution. And many Americans did not want a strong national government, right? Just the year before, we had written the Declaration of Independence to get rid of a strong national government, right? We felt like Britain's government, the king and parliament, were too strong and too controlling. And so we didn't want to turn around and replace Britain's government with a different, strong, powerful national government. On top of that, each state already had its own constitution. They had already, all 13 of them, had already written their own constitutions and set up their own governments, and they didn't want to give up power to a strong national government. They had already been making their own decisions and passing their own laws. And so those 13 states didn't want to turn around and have to give power up to a big, strong national government. So they established the Articles of Confederation. And under this plan of government, basically the states had almost all of the power. It was like 13 little mini countries. And the national government was pretty much just there to do a few things. But the states were, it was pretty much like an alliance of states rather than one unified country. And there were a lot of weaknesses. So we're going to look at quite a few weaknesses of the Articles here. For one, there was no president and no Supreme Court. There was only a Congress that was there to make laws, and it had very limited power, so it couldn't make a whole ton of laws. There was only a small number of things it could do. Each state had one vote. 13 states, each state had one vote, even though some states had a lot more people than others. It took 9 votes to get a law passed. So it wasn't just a majority. It actually took more than a majority. 9 out of 13 had to agree to pass a law. So not many laws got passed through Congress. Some did, but not very many. If you wanted to change the Articles of Confederation, to make an amendment to it, all 13 states had to agree. Well, as you can imagine, it would be very difficult to get all 13 states to agree on something. So there were never any amendments to the Articles of Confederation. The national government was not allowed to charge taxes or set up a currency system. So every state could have its own money. Imagine that, right? If you went from Virginia to North Carolina might have different money. And then you went to South Carolina, and South Carolina had different money than North Carolina and Virginia. It would be kind of a mess. And states could actually tax each other. And there was nothing the national government could do about it. So Virginia could tax tobacco coming from Maryland. And in return, Maryland might tax goods coming out of Virginia. As you can imagine, that would lead to a lot of fighting and bickering between the states. After a few years of this system of government, our economy was a total mess. Trade was way down. Trade was only about 50% of what it was before the Revolution. States were passing tariffs to keep out products from other states. So farmers in Virginia, they didn't want crops coming in from other states that might be cheaper. So states were basically blocking products from other states and taxing them. And there wasn't much money going around, right? And the money that was going around was very confusing because the 13 states could each pretty much come up with their own system of money. The government was not allowed to tax the people. So when the government needed money, it had to ask the states. And the states only gave, on average, about 20% of what the national government was asking for. So you can imagine, right? The national government says, okay, we really need some money. Hey, Virginia, can you guys give us, $100,000? Virginia could just say, no, we're not going to give you anything. And more often than not, what happened was the states would give a little bit. So if the national government asked Virginia for $100,000, Virginia might say, well, we're not going to give you all of that, but here's $20,000. Now go ask North Carolina. So the national government didn't have money that it needed. Under the Articles of Confederation, we looked incredibly weak to other countries. We were kind of a laughingstock, right? Like, oh, yeah, those colonies, right? They broke away, and look at them. They can't even run their own country. Britain, who we had just broken away from, refused to turn over some forts that they were supposed to give us out west. Right? We beat them. They're supposed to leave. And they realized how weak we were under the Articles, and they refused to turn over some of those forts. They also were selling guns to the Indians to use against us, and our national government couldn't do anything about it. Britain would not allow us to trade with their colonies in the West Indies, right? They blocked us from trading. Spain wouldn't allow our farmers to ship goods down the Mississippi River. These other countries are doing these things, and Congress, the national government, is too weak to do anything about it. The final straw comes in Massachusetts when there was a revolt that the government was too weak to put down. And this was called Shay's Rebellion. Long story short, basically what happens is you have some farmers out in western Massachusetts, a lot of whom fought in the Revolution. And they had not received money that they were supposed to get from fighting the war. They owed money to merchants and creditors, and the courts started taking their farms because they weren't paying their debts. So these farmers rose up in a rebellion and basically stormed the courthouses and shut them down. And the picture you see here is a drawing of that. And the government in Massachusetts was struggling to deal with it. So they asked the national government for help. And the national government, because it was so powerless, couldn't do anything at all to help. So after Shay's Rebellion, the leaders of the country decided, okay, this isn't working, right? We're sort of sliding into anarchy here. There's rebellions. We look weak. Other countries are not respecting us. We need to fix our government. So at first they decided to have a meeting to revise and improve the Articles of Confederation. But when they get there, a number of the delegates decide, hey, let's not revise this thing. Let's throw it out and let's write a brand new constitution.